Hi there. My name is Tamir Hassan. I work in the King County Alternative Dispute Resolution and Organizational Health Group, which lives in the Career and Culture Division of the Department of Human Resources. I'm a mediator, a coach, a facilitator, and all-around conflict specialist. And we're going to spend some time today talking about conflict. After this session, you'll be able to understand the principles of healthy conflict engagement, recognize conflict narratives and how to shift them, consider a new frame for thinking about conflict, and also know who to contact when you feel like the conflict situation you're tasked with handling is outside of your skill set. So promoting healthy conflict has two categories. There's prevention, which includes coaching, labor management, committee facilitation, and conflict coaching, or the actual engagement of existing conflict using facilitated conversations or mediations. I would also note that within the coaching, that's around leadership development and skill development, and sometimes career growth. Conflict coaching is specific to stepping people through how to address conflict for themselves rather than having someone else step in to address it for them. So what is conflict? It can be described as when two or more people interact and perceive incompatible difference or threats. They then behave and respond to escalate or de-escalate the conflict. The important piece here to note is that how you behave and respond when faced with conflict, you really have a choice that can make all the difference of escalating the conflict or de-escalating and resolving the conflict. Overall, conflict costs money. Here's some stats around conflict and how much it's cost King County through time, and also some of the recurring issues that contribute to the cost, like performance, productivity, turnover due to employees being fed up and tired with the environment. There's also, because we're in a labor environment, grievances. People often want to call out sick because they just don't want to deal with the environment and aren't feeling supported or equipped to do so. I want to point out here that $18,000 per incident, that's a pretty big number for conflict within an organization of 15,000 plus people, and it adds up over time. So when you think about conflict in a healthy or unhealthy way, usually unhealthy conflict stems from individuals being focused on themselves from the perspective of the me or I. Within healthy conflict, individuals are thinking about the us, the we, because there's a commitment to resolve the conflict and maintain the relationships. When in conflict, people can often become triggered or emotional. When we think about being triggered, it's a big umbrella word that we know emotions are tied to, but we're not always sure how to navigate it. David Rock of the Neuro Leadership Institute came up with this great model to help give a little bit more detail and language around what it means to be triggered, which also gives you a way to work your way through it for yourself or with someone else. The way our brains work is we're constantly scanning for threat and reward. When you think of that fight or flight and freeze system in our brain, there is cortisol as a hormone associated with that in our brain. And when that spikes, we're in that threat state. And we're looking for ways to protect ourselves or save ourselves. The reward state is the other half, which is fueled by the hormone dopamine. And that's a reward space where we're looking to get more of it. So our brains are constantly scanning in these 5 categories of the SCARF model for that reward state or the threat state. Status is akin to ranking. So as you're thinking about relating to others, especially if you're a leader, a supervisor, a manager. You're looking around for status, and your employees are also scanning for status. And status can simply be who holds the power. When things start going downhill, who has the authority to step in and have the last word? When someone is feeling less than in status, they're going to retreat or defer. So you want to be conscious of when you yourself or when someone else is feeling a threat in their status, because there might be ways you could assist them to talk their way through feeling equal again. With uncertainty, something as simple as not knowing if you're going to have your job next week is a threat. And for some people, that threat can take over and have them emotionally spiral downwards. And so think about what you can do when you recognize that someone is feeling a threat, uncertainty, and how you can support them in feeling more reward or certain about their situation. Autonomy. Do you feel like you can do what you need to do in your role without having too much direction or micromanagement? For some people, this really matters. And sometimes people feel micromanaged and then they spiral out of control emotionally and can be in that conflict space. Or they're fighting to get the autonomy back and creating conflict from that perspective. So also be aware of when people are in this space and what are some of the things you can ask them or do to help them feel more autonomy from that reward point of view. Relatedness. Think of this as the in crowd, out crowd. When people aren't feeling like they're part of the in crowd, they're not feeling very related and they're feeling that threat state. Think about how you could approach them to help them feel more of that reward state and relatedness or a part of the in crowd. And the last category is fairness. When people feel like things just aren't fair, they're feeling that threat state. Often a conversation around what would help them feel like things were more fair can help them start to feel that reward state and also involve them in creating a solution that they could be satisfied with. So remember, all of these can help contribute to identifying why someone might be triggered, and then also start to think about how you can support them to move from that threat state to the reward state. Within conflict, we often see stories, and stories that are typically full of drama. And there's this great triangle here, Karpman's drama triangle. It's out on Google. There's tons of other information and videos that goes into the depths and details of it. But what's really important to know about this is that it's a cycle. It's depicted as a triangle to depict three roles within the drama triangle: the persecutor, the rescuer, and the victim. And when we say victim, we're speaking of someone in the victim mindset, someone that's not actually a victim of a particular incident or a crime. Someone who's really feeling disempowered and like someone else has all the control and they have none. In their eyes, that person will most likely be playing the role of a persecutor. And victims often look for someone to bail them out of the situation because they're feeling powerless. And they're looking to someone to rescue them, which is that rescuer role. Think back to a conflict that you've been a part of. And using this lens or perspective, think about the roles being played in that conflict and the individuals who were playing the roles. Something you'll notice is that within a single conflict or conversation, individuals can actually shift roles within that single conflict. So there isn't just one persecutor or one rescuer or one victim. When one person changes roles, another person changes roles as well. The challenge is it's a cycle that continues, and the only way out of it is to realize that you're in it and to be able to shift perspectives. So why don't people like to talk face to face about conflict? What are some of your thoughts? Take a moment and think about that. For you, why do you avoid conflict? Why is it easier to write an email to try to hash out a conflict, or even send a text message? Sometimes it can be easier to have a phone call rather than walk over to somebody and talk about the conflict face to face. There's a lot of fears, apprehensions of messing it up or making the other person mad, or realizing that you might get mad yet again about the situation and not be able to control yourself. We often don't seek to speak to others about these conflicts face to face for fear of emotions. And whether it's in ourselves or in others, when those emotions come up, we're often not equipped to navigate successfully through the conversation to resolve it. And we know it's predictable with those emotions, so we do our best to avoid them. So when you think about that drama triangle, to shift into what's called the purpose triangle, there are 3 new roles which can be substituted for each of the other roles. So for a persecutor, someone who is seeing another person as a persecutor, you could ask the question to humanize that person. Why would a reasonable, rational, decent person do this thing? And that can help shift a rescuer or a victim's perspective into seeing a persecutor as a human. When someone's stepping in to rescue, to shift their perspective, you can ask them, what are your long-term goals? What are your strategies helping you achieve them? And what are other options available? That can have them pause and think about why they're stepping in to save the day and protect the rescuer from the persecutor. And lastly, from the victim perspective, you can shift their mindset by asking something like, how might you be contributing to the situation? And this gets them to start thinking from a more empowered place to not only how have they been contributing to the situation, but to focus on how do they want to contribute to the situation moving forward towards a resolution. One thing that's important within conflict is to be aware of your listening styles. All of us listen for something specific because conditioning, and we've derived our preference for what we listen for. Typically, when you're listening for what happened in a situation or the facts, or maybe you're listening for how it felt for the individuals, for yourself or others. And those feelings really matter. They're not the only thing that matters, but for some of us, that's the first thing that really jumps out and gets our attention. There's also overall why it mattered, or the values an individual holds that they're trying to make sure are met. So take a moment to think about which one of these you actually are drawn to. Which one matters most to you? And know that as you're listening, if you're primarily focused on your preference, you might be missing out on other key information that's happening within the conversation that's just as important to make someone feel heard, understood, and ultimately resolve the conflict. So we're going to watch a 2-minute video here, and I want you to focus on the conversation in the video and listen for each of these 3 categories. And if necessary, rewind the video and watch it a few times and focus on each category separately.